My name is Nancy Hernandez, and joining me today is Janet Dubel-Grimm. Thank you, Janet, for being with us today and for sharing your memories.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
Now, we understand that you were born and raised in Mount Airy.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what it was like living in Mount Airy.
So pretty much everybody knows where the old firehouse was. Right next to the old firehouse on the same side is it's apartments. So it's a older building with 2 porches, and my grandmother, Estelle Smith, well, she was Fleming then, lived in the downstairs, and my mom and dad and I lived in an upstairs apartment while the house was being built on Plainview Avenue. And when I was 2, we moved into the house on Plainview, and that's where I grew up.
And now that's close to Hill Street. Give a little bit of an idea.
Yes, it's right off of Hill Street. If you turn onto Sunset Avenue and bear right onto Hill Street, it's the very next left.
Okay, so that was close to town, but a little bit removed. What did it look like then?
Sorry, I'm just going to pause you for a moment.
Do you not like my hands flapping?
No, I'm just going to move this a little bit farther down so that it's not rustling.
Rubbing.
Yeah.
To put it in my cleavage. I'll have him embarrassed before we're done. Trust me.
All right, you guys.
Okay.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what it looked like then.
As you entered it was all houses that were pretty much built in the 50s, I will say, except for the ones on Hill Street. Those were the ones that were your Victorians and bigger homes. As you turned onto Plainview, Miss Olive Mount had a pretty little white Victorian right on the corner. And you had Bill Wagner, who was associated with the locker plant on the left. Growing up, it was very interesting because everybody had their nicknames. You had Tink and Mary and their son Buzz, who was very well known in town with the fire company. Citation used to keep lawnmowers in people's porch accesses and whatnot, and you'd see him going around town, and he's been trying them out, make sure they work. He always had a handshake and a hug for everybody. You had Mr. Hood, which at that time he couldn't speak, so everyone called him Dummy, which we wouldn't do today, but a wonderful man. Mr. Hood had a shoe repair shop downtown in the old Flatiron building.
On the bottom floor there?
Mm-hmm. Okay. As you came up from the firehouse, his door opened right into his shop.
Okay.
So.
And who else was there?
On my street was my Aunt Nellie, who folks in town know, Nellie Brown, lived next door. My grandmother, Geraldine Watkins Dubel, lived in the next house. Across the street was Lester and Dorothy Lohman. Mrs. Lohman was my 5th grade school teacher.
Well, that'd be kind of awkward.
Yeah, she's wonderful, and by the way, June 9th she will be 106.
Wow, and she still lives in town?
No, she doesn't. She moved up to Homewood in Williamsport quite a number of years ago to be closer to her daughter, who lives in Morgantown, West Virginia.
Okay.
But she's still there, and she's still as sharp as ever.
What was it like growing up across the street from your teacher?
It was fine. It was fine. We ran the yards and played, and we knew everybody. It was not an issue at all. Walter and Frances Franklin were the next house. And then you went to a dirt road down the woods to, and I still to this day call them Uncle Lewis, Aunt Julia, and Aunt Rose. 2 sisters and Aunt Julia's husband, Uncle Lewis. And then further down was the railroad tracks.
So did you play on the railroad tracks?
Oh, yes. Yes, I can tell you a little story about playing on the railroad tracks. My grandmother and I had a dog. He was a Collie German Shepherd mix, and his name was Duke. My dad always said it was a John Henry Mussetter cow dog. It's a very fancy dog. So my grandmother and I were going to take a walk down the railroad tracks. And I waited and I waited and I waited quite a long time for her until I finally got tired of waiting. And I was little. So Duke and I left. And we went on our walk. And we walked down this tracks and the train came. And at that point in time, the conductor stopped the train and asked if I was lost, little girl. No, we're just taking a walk. And so he went on his way. And coming back up the tracks, I saw my dad. And I'm like, "Hi, Dad." I got my butt beat all the way home.
Oh.
So, yeah, I remember that walk.
Yeah, you're lucky you didn't get run over. That's interesting that conductors would just stop.
Yeah, he wanted to make sure I was okay, so. But we used to take a lot of walks down the tracks. There was bushes called that you'd pick chinky pins. They're like a little, I never saw one because they were either not open or they were already open and dropped. But they were a pod and they would open and it was a chinky pin, they called them. I've never seen one. But yeah, my grandmother and we used to take a lot of walks. So.
What were some of the other things that you did for fun growing up in town?
Oh my goodness, riding bikes. We were members of the swimming pool. So we used to go to, up to the swimming pool all the time. As a kid, would walk home from the elementary school, and I'd always walk on the wall that was in front of, at that point in time, my Uncle Ira Watkins's house. Up toward the elementary school, there's a wall that comes down in front of his old house, which is Delane Hobbs's old house now, the addition and all on it.
Right on the corner of Main and
Yes, and June Beck's house, there was a wall that went down, and I think it's still there. So we'd always walk on top of the wall, and I would go to the lumber yard where Dad worked.
Where was the lumber yard?
The lumber yard is directly behind the buildings right across from the town hall. So if you picture the buildings right across from the town hall on Main Street, behind that, it's now the, Antiques Emporium or something. That was Mount Airy Lumber Company.
And that's where your father worked?
Mm-hmm.
And so you would go there after school? Tell us about that.
Play in the buildings. climb the wooden ladders and walk the wooden walkways, and would jump down onto the bags of concrete that were stocked up there for people. When you are in the town parking lot, you'll see two main buildings, separated by a lower building. And the lower building wasn't there. So you had the two main buildings, and then you had other buildings on behind those. And Dad would spend most of his time in the one building where they had a lot of equipment, saws and whatnot, and he'd cut glass for people and saw lumber and all that kind of stuff.
Seems like a little bit of a dangerous place to be playing.
It was back in the day. We didn't get hurt and nobody cared. It was great. Right across from, the little street that goes up toward the Antique Emporium now.
Okay, yes.
There was it was the lumber company offices. They're not there anymore. It was right on the street, right on the corner. And I used to spend a lot of time in there. Herman Gillis worked there. Uncle Ira, who owned it, had offices in there. Delane Hobbs had his photography store was right next door, that little low brick building just before you get to the train station area. That used to be his wife's clothing store, as a kid's clothes store. And then Delane Hobbs, when that closed some years later, Delane Hobbs had a studio in there.
Oh, wow. So you've seen a lot of changes within the town.
A lot of changes. Yeah, a lot of changes. Mount Airy had a jewelry store at one time. I think his name was Chick Straw. I could be wrong. But it was either on the lower side of the restaurant, the Mount Airy restaurant right down the street, or it was on the upper side, but it was just a small little jewelry store.
Okay. What other kinds of businesses were there?
Happy Albright's appliance store. I think he sold a good many appliances and whatnot. Lindsay Browning's grocery store, and Lindsay would deliver in his big black sedan kind of thing. He'd deliver your groceries. It's in the same, his store was in the same place as Browning Insurance.
Okay.
Across the street was Tops Market. So Topper had a grocery store that...
Just very close within one another.
right across, yeah. There was also, so where, is it Lorenzo's?
Lorienzo's.
In that group right there, when I was growing up, there was a furniture store. I always remember the furniture store because there was a big stuffed Arctic fox that you could see up on a shelf. And I wanted that thing so bad. That store burned. I don't remember when I looked on Mount Airy history, I didn't really see a date for that, but I was little and I stood over in front of Browning's and watched the fire. And there, for a long time, there was a wall there with nothing. It was just like a little, like waist high or whatever wall that separated the sidewalk from
Plummeting below.
below, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a pretty steep drop off.
Well,
right
and then
behind
for
there.
a while you could actually kind of, people would pull vehicles and stuff in that area too. And then they built it back up. I want to say I remember the mill fire, but what were the dates on that? Do you remember when the mill burned?
I don't.
I remember the mill, so I must have been pretty small, but I remember the mill.
Wow.
I remember Watkins' Five and Dime, which is where Gu's Antiques is.
Okay.
And kids, we'd all go in there, you know, after school or on weekends, and we'd look at everything, and poor Latimer Watkins would follow us all around to make sure, I guess, we weren't taking stuff. I spent a lot of time in Doc Myers' drugstore.
Where was that located?
It's right smack in the middle of town. I don't think there's anything in it or has had anything in it for many, many years. It's in between Gu's and here, and it's the building that has the green top with the points. It's a
Okay.
beautiful building with a brick front. They had a soda fountain. I'd always get tuna on white toast with lettuce, tomato, mayonnaise, and a vanilla milkshake.
Sounds good.
It was. And they had all comic books and everything. But if you went past the soda fountain, there was the pharmacy where Doc Myers worked.
I wonder if that's the place that's like a museum now. You have to get a reservation to go in. and
Is
visit.
that?
But it could be because there's a soda fountain in there and a.
Well, I
little
was
pharmacy.
Facebooking with Pete Ballas today, and I was going to ask him if he was going to be in the museum. He said it opened at noon. So now all I need to do is find out which one of these little places is the museum.
The Historical Society Museum is now in the old train depot.
Okay.
And that building that you're referring to, I think, is privately owned, but he has it set up at like a museum, but you have to make private reservations.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of memories in that place.
So when you got a little bit older and you attended school all the way through high school here in Mount Airy, right?
I went to the elementary school. My first grade, I didn't do kindergarten. Back in those days, you didn't have to do preschool and kindergarten and all that. That started, might have been getting popular in 62 or 3 when I started first grade, but we didn't at that time. My first grade school teacher was my Aunt Corinne Watkins, who stayed an extra year prior to retiring to have me in her first grade class. Unfortunately, having a teacher for an aunt, by the time I got to first grade, I could already do my numbers writing from 1 to 100. I could write cursive, not just printing. I could sit and read to you The Wizard of Oz. And then when I started first grade, it was see Dick run.
Oh no.
See Spot run. So most of my reports home to my parents were if she would only pay attention and quit drawing horses. I was bored, I'm sorry. So, but it was good memories, good memories. I had then Mrs. Will, and then Mrs. Friend, and then it says 1, 2, 3. I don't remember 4th, and then Mrs. Lohman was 5th, and then I went to the middle school where we changed classes. So that was a lot of fun.
Now, did you go to high school here, or did you go to South Carroll?
No, I went to Linganore.
Oh, okay.
Because Main Street divides Frederick and Carroll County, and we were 100 yards from the Carroll County line. My sister went to Linganore. Went to South Carroll.
Your sister went to South Carroll, but
She
you went to
did. No, my sister went to South Carroll. She was more into music than I was, and they had a better music program. So she actually went to South Carroll.
Now that's interesting that you lived in the same house and you went to two different
It was
schools.
just a change in the programs, just a better program at one school than the other. But I loved the people I met at Linganore, had a great time, and wouldn't change it.
That's interesting.
So
So tell me a little bit about when you were in high school, what you all did for fun here in town.
oh my goodness. Well, like I said, we were members of the pool, so we did a lot of swimming. Going to school at Linganore, it's a hike. I mean, it's a fair piece. And most of the people that I went to school with lived more toward Liberty Town, and in that area they were a lot of farm kids. And so they really didn't come to Mount Airy that much. So the people that I hung around with as far as school friends, there was only 7 of us that went to Linganore. The rest went to South Carroll at that time. So it was Eddie Thren, Randy Gibson, Jimmy Lair, Elaine and Robin Franklin, Tracy Reed. Those were kind of the folks that come to mind quickly, you know, that I grew up with and went to Linganore with.
So did you hang out with a lot of the students from South Carroll then? Were there more of them in Mount Airy?
I knew more of them because we all went to elementary and middle school together. But, you know, you're getting older, you're meeting new people, you're starting to date. They're off in Carroll County and over toward Taylorsville, you know, now. That's where they focus. So I really didn't see a lot of the people anymore that I had hung out with in middle school.
Okay.
You know, people grow and change and meet new friends and that kind of thing.
So what would you consider some of the biggest changes that you've seen from when you were first living here as a child to what you see now? I know you don't live in town now, but when you come back.
A lot of growth, just the developments that have sprung up. For example, just going back Plainview Avenue now, there's no longer the woods with the dirt road. There is pavement that goes to a cul-de-sac to the 2-story houses that overlook Prospect and the Legion area. I mean, it just goes on. You ride out to the new firehouse. I know it's been there forever now, but there's the old one and there's the new one. And you just see houses back Buffalo Road and all that area. It's just all changed. So I would say the growth and the development of the area. And then downtown, Mount Airy was prone to such big fires. And so downtown has changed. I think for the better. I love the little inset in between the place we're in right now, Town Hall, and the others. How it kind of insets and has the restaurants and the little shops. I love towns that are walkable and have nice, trendy little shops and restaurants to go in. And Mount Airy's kind of turned into that downtown. It seems like when I was growing up, my mom would say, "Who is that?" And I'd go, "Well, that's so-and-so. They live on this street or that street." You knew everyone. When I come to town now, I don't really know anybody. A lot of the older people have either passed or moved or whatever. But the folks that have come to town seem to take, like yourself, you're not native to Mount Airy, you moved here.
Yes.
But you take such an interest in the town, and that's nice to see.
It's a great town.
It is. It really is. We always called it a bedroom community because so many people that did start moving to Mount Airy worked in D.C. or Rockville, or they really came here after work to sleep and then get back up and head down the road again. But I think the folks that live here now truly take an interest in the town, and that's nice.
Now, when you were growing up here, do you have any idea what the population was?
No, unfortunately, I don't.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to look and see.
But
I think it's close to 10,000 now.
Oh, I'm sure it's definitely tripled, probably.
Let's see. How about when you were growing up, what were the fun places to eat?
Fun places to eat in Mount Airy. Let's see, there was Frederick. There was, oh my goodness. Well, one place that's no longer here anymore that we did, people cooked.
True.
People cook, and I tend to do that. My husband and I eat at home almost every single night. And it's nothing for me to just fix something. But one place that was a lot of fun that's not here anymore, everybody talks about Jimmy Cone in Damascus, and there's one in Ridgeville, I think. Isn't there a Jimmy Cone in Ridgeville?
On Ridgeville Boulevard?
Well, isn't there a little ice cream place in Ridgeville? Well, anyway.
By Ridgeville, I'm not sure what you're referring. The road?
Well, Ridgeville, I'm sorry, when you head out of town, like you're going to go to Frederick, so you go south on Main Street.
Okay.
You'll come to the intersection with the light, the very first stoplight, and it's kind of all developed now. There's a grocery store and there's some shops on the left and with a restaurant and whatnot. That's Ridgeville.
Oh, okay.
That was always, yeah.
There is still a Jimmy Cone there.
Okay. Well, before they built the highway, Main Street just went through Ridgeville and kept on going to Damascus.
Okay.
So right where you get to where the highway goes across, there used to be Twin Kiss. And that was an ice cream store, and we used to go there often. And then I think one night it exploded.
Oh, why was that?
I don't know. I guess gas canisters or something. But the highway came through, and took that area anyway.
Okay. It was like a
So yeah, sad.
foreshadowing.
Yeah, exactly. I truly, well, so the drugstore, because you could get food, sandwich kinds of things and sodas and stuff in the drugstore at the counter. And then the restaurant.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Because it was much smaller. How about, you talked a little bit about your neighbors. What types of, did you have neighborhood gatherings or local events or?
We always had, so I guess the big things were, Mom's birthday was July 5th, so we'd always have a big picnic on the 4th of July. And one of the things I really vivid memories as a kid was the Firemen's Carnival. Because I always rode in the parades in Engine 5 with my dad, and we would get, just before you pulled into the carnival grounds where the judging thing was, I would always get out there and join Mom because Dad was going to the carnival, to park the engine at the carnival. But the bypass wasn't there then. So when you went Park Avenue and then onto Twin Arch Road, When you got to where the bypass is now, you would pull into a dirt road or a dirt lane, and as a kid, today I can picture it. It was all woods, and you'd have the dust from the cars. So the lights were kind of, it would be like a little hazy, but you'd have all the colors from the Ferris wheel and the colored lights and everything. And the people would park their cars either in the field that's still there or along the woods and then walk over. It was quite different than what it is today.
Yeah, you can envision a small town community fair. That's the picture perfect.
Oh yeah, it was great times.
So were the carnival grounds, they were located where they're still located right now, right? This
Yes.
was after they had moved from.
It's evolved, but basically the bypass took that area that I'm talking about, where you would kind of pull into the dirt and park along the woods and then walk over to the carnival grounds.
That sounds lovely.
It was.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to drive up and
Oh,
share
you're
your
very
memories.
welcome. You're very welcome. I saw it on Facebook, and what really caught my eye was, of course, my picture of my Aunt Nellie, who was involved, and I got reading it, and I said, that sounds like something fun to do. So,
Thank you very much.
you're very welcome.